This Morning. I'm Sarah Colvin, and joining me in studio, I welcome our energy coordinator, Richard Elrick. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Sarah. Nice to see you as always.
Nice to see you as well. So we have many things to discuss today. Of course, the Wastewater Energy Recovery pilot project that was in the Cape Cod Times recently. There was a whole group of folks that were here at Town Hall last week to tour the facility. Tell me a little bit about this. It's a complex process, but
Very complex.
Really what people need to know.
Well, the Wastewater Energy Recovery pilot project is a project that we've undertaken through a grant from the Mass Department of Energy Resources. They provided us with a $50,000 grant, and working with GHD Consultants, a consultancy firm based here in Hyannis, a project was developed whereby we would attempt to use, again, we didn't actually connect to the buildings, but attempt to use the temperature differences that we get through our wastewater in an effort to help us with the process of reducing our air conditioning costs over at Town Hall and possibly at the school administration building. Again, this is a pilot project. It's not at this point connected to either building, but the idea is, and there are two components to the project. One is the heat exchanger itself, and the other element to the process is a device that extracts the solids and the sediments out of the liquid, out of the wastewater, before it goes to the heat exchanger. And what we're looking at for this project is to, first of all, determine whether or not the technology works in a wastewater setting. Also, whether or not and to what degree maintenance is required, specifically with respect to the fact that it's using wastewater. And I should point out that this is the only project of its type in North America. There are several that have been built by Huber Pumps, and that's the name of the company that's providing us with the hardware, with the pump. There is a similar operation installation in Switzerland, and then several others in Europe, and then one in Canada that's in the planning process. So we feel very excited, in fact, to be the only community in the United States that's working to see whether this technology is effective, and that's why we had so many visitors.
Right.
I mean, we had people from US EPA, our own Department of Environmental Protection for the state, Department of Energy Resources, and we had representatives from the Charles River Watershed Association as well, just to look at the technology and to see to what degree it has value. And this project will run for, in its pilot stage, for 30 days, and we'll be collecting the data, primarily the temperatures for the intake and the input for the water and the output as well, the amount of sediment that's removed, the amount of time that's required for maintenance. And then ultimately the goal is to look at all of the numbers and to determine whether or not it would be cost effective for the town to actually utilize this process with the buildings across the street, Town Hall and the school administration building, to try to reduce the amount of money and energy that goes into cooling that building in the summer.
Right, and so it's really an interesting concept. You know, when I think about it, the wastewater normally passes through that South Street pumping station, just goes right to the water pollution control. And this is kind of harnessing the energy that's in there, in just the fact that it's naturally warm, creating that into energy that could be used to heat and cool Town Hall, which is
absolutely, it is fascinating, and it's a pretty complicated technology, though the process of using heat exchangers is well tried and been utilized in a lot of other settings, just not with wastewater as the fluid that they're using. So there's certainly a lot of excitement around it. The state, I know, is very keen on seeing the results. And while the technology would be quite expensive to utilize if we were paying the full cost, in the event that it turns out to be economically viable, but there's going to be a lot of grants and a lot of funding assistance that would come around to, I think, make it a lot less expensive than it would otherwise be. But we'll at the end of the project, we'll look at the numbers and we'll see what the data says, and then we'll decide where to go from there.
Without a doubt. So let's talk a little bit about recycling. We got a pair of grants recently to fund a couple of different initiatives. So tell me a little bit about the grant funding.
Well, these are yearly grants that we apply for through the Mass Department of Environmental Protection, and they're under what's called the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program. And under that program, the first grant award that we got was in the amount of $10,500. $9,000 was from what's called the Recycling Dividends Program. And the difference, $1,500, was through the Small Scale Initiatives Program. And the difference between those two grants is that the Small Scale Initiatives grant amount, it's only $1,500, needs to be used in the year in which the award was made. So we have to use it this year. And there's a little bit more limitation on how we use that $1,500. Obviously, if it really promotes recycling, educational materials, compost bins, things of that nature. The larger amount, we've got more flexibility on how we use it. We don't have to use it up in one year. We can save it and combine it with previous year's awards. The latest talk, and no final decisions have been made yet on how we're going to use the larger amount, but Dan Santos, our DPW director, was mentioning that we need some additional, my mind just went blank, the solar-powered big bellies.
Yes, of course,
We need a couple more of those. We need more than those, but that would certainly be sufficient to fund those. So we're looking into that. But again, this is money that certainly helps us promote recycling, and we're still actually waiting to hear on an award for a grant that I wrote for carpet and mattress diversion. This would provide us with funding for a closed-top trailer to help us divert more of that material. And as well, we applied for $5,000 to help us with a pilot program for kitchen scraps, composting diversion program, to allow people to come and drop off their household kitchen scraps at the transfer station. So we'll see if that funding comes in as well.
Excellent. And speaking of the transfer station, I know that TS Engineering is on site and doing some work, taking a look at the configuration of our transfer station. So tell me where we are in that process.
Yes, the transfer station engineering work is moving forward. We have contracted with environmental partners to do the work, and they're developing a proposal, as we've talked in the past, about how to increase the efficiency of the operation, increase the amount of recycling we do, but also to make the environment a little bit safer for our customers and for staff. And last week, was probably the week before, I and representatives from environmental partners, along with PJ Kelleher, who's the Solid Waste Division Supervisor, we visited some transfer stations. We went to Plymouth, and Dennis, and Yarmouth just to get a sense of what's happening in these other facilities, how their operations are run, and what's the traffic flow. Right. One of the things that we did notice that seemed to be quite effective in these other communities that have it is that they have a parking setup so that you don't have to pull in and back out, pull in and back out.
Yarmouth is like that.
It is. And so what you do is you're able to parallel park, offload whatever it is you need to offload, recyclables and your trash, and then just sort of continue along. So it reduces the potential hazards of driving in that area. And we're looking at that and seeing what would have to happen at our facility to allow us to configure our drop-off a little bit more safe and a little bit more convenient for folks.
Indeed. It really is interesting to me how different all of the transfer stations can be when I think about, you know, the Harwich one I used to go to when I was growing up, and then the Yarmouth one, and ours here in Barnstable. It's interesting to see how each municipality kind of sets it up, and whether it's, you know, the way it developed over time or planned. It's just interesting. It'll be cool to see what changes.
It is interesting, and when you think back of the long history of most of these operations, they were just holes on the ground at one point.
Yep.
And then eventually we had to, of course, cap all of our landfills, and now they're little humps that have golf courses or solar on them. But it is interesting, and each one has its own history, and usually it grew as it needed to grow without a lot of thinking that went into the design. But hopefully we can make ours be a lot more thoughtful at the end of the day.
Well, I wanted to touch briefly on the transfer station survey, and I think maybe next time you're here we can talk a little bit more in depth. But we have kind of compiled the results from the transfer station survey. What are the things that stick out in your mind the most?
Well, what we wanted to do was to get a handle on the percentages of people that use the facility for specific reasons. So, for example, and how many trips they make to the transfer station regularly. So the first question, how many trips per week on average do you make to the Barnstable transfer station? By far, the great majority of the people who returned these samplings, about 78% said they use it once a week. And we had a good number of people, about 15%, that they actually use it twice a week. But we also had a fairly good sampling of folks who use it less than once a week.
Right.
And that's important to know as well. And I know we're not going to go through all the questions. I'll just mention them, and we can go over them next week. But
sure.
The other questions were how many bags of trash, a large barrel size 30-gallon, does your household generate per week on average? How many household members do you have? Do you compost kitchen scraps? And what do you use the transfer station mainly for? So we can get into more details next week. But those are the questions we got results for. And, you know, we didn't get all 9,000 folks to fill out a survey, but we got a couple of thousand. So that's helpful. That's
right. Well, you can never expect to get everything back, but a couple of thousand, I think, out of the 9,000 survey is good.
Yeah, no, we were pleased.
Great. Well, Richard, I thank you so much, as always, for joining us here. Always a pleasure, and we will talk with you again in a couple of weeks.
Look forward to it.
Thanks much. Richard Elrick is our energy coordinator here in the town of Barnstable. For Barnstable This Morning, I'm Sarah.